The cry ripped through the air, sharp and relentless, like a blade against marble walls, echoing down the cold corridors. It wasn't the whimper of a spoiled child, but the raw anguish of a soul being torn apart. Amara Johnson froze, her hands wet with soap, the sting of lemon cleanser rising in the air. She stood by the tall window on the second floor, where the midday sun blazed against polished stone. Only 5 days in the Cross estate, and already she had heard the warning whispered by every servant. Never go near the 5th floor. The cry rose again, longer, sharper, filled with panic. Amara's chest tightened. It was the same haunting sound she had grown up with. Her brother Jermaine's desperate screams, the cries of an autistic boy the world never learned to hear. "Miss Johnson." The butler's low voice floated from the stairs. "Stay away from the upper floors. That is not your duty." Amara gripped the cloth in her hands, her eyes fixed on the spiral staircase. "Do not go near," the rules said. But her heart urged her forward. Someone was breaking. She took one step, then another, the cries pulling her onward. At the end of the hallway, a door stood ajar, light flickering like broken visions. Amara pushed it open and gasped. On the thick carpet, a boy of 6 crouched against the bookcase, slamming his forehead again and again, his body shaking with meaningless cries. No adult, no comfort, only the merciless cycle of pain. Amara stood still, breath shallow. Her mind screamed to turn back or lose her job, but the memory of Jermaine bleeding under a dining table was louder. She stepped forward slowly. "Hey, sweetheart." Her voice barely a whisper. "I won't touch you. I'll just sit here." The boy, Noah, didn't look at her, but his head striking slowed. Amara kept her hands open, non-threatening. Then, instinctively, she traced a small circle on her chest, the old sign of safety her grandmother once taught Jermaine. For a moment, Noah's eyes flickered toward her, then away, but his cries softened into ragged breaths. Amara's heart clenched. She had reached him. "What the hell are you doing here?" The voice crashed behind her. Amara spun. Adrian Cross, master of the estate, billionaire with an icy gaze, towered in the doorway. His black suit was precise, one hand gripping his phone like a weapon, fury carved into every line. "Sir, Amara stammered, heart racing. "I heard him crying. I thought something was wrong." "No one gave you permission to enter," Adrian hissed. "Step back, now." She began to retreat, but Adrian bent to lift his son. Instantly, Noah shrieked, thrashing with surprising strength, his nails tearing at his father's shirt. Adrian froze, shock breaking through his anger. Why is he? For the first time, his voice shook with helplessness. Amara took a chance. "Let me." Adrian's glare burned, but beneath it flickered fear. He didn't grant permission, yet he didn't stop her. Amara knelt, opening her arms. Noah saw her, and something shifted. His fight dissolved. Slowly, he leaned into her, pressed his face into her shoulder, his small body sinking into the safety he had been searching for. The room went silent. Adrian stood frozen. No doctor, no expensive therapist, no contract had ever managed this. But this young maid, this outsider with soap still on her hands, had calmed the child he could never reach. "What did you do?" Adrian asked, voice hoarse, stripped of steel. "I did nothing, sir," Amara whispered. "I listened and remembered what once helped my brother." Adrian's chest tightened. His perfect suit felt suffocating, his billionaire power meaningless. All his wealth had failed to buy this moment. Yet the girl before him had given his son peace. He stared at her long and hard, a thought breaking through, unwanted but undeniable. This woman is not just a servant. For the first time, the mansion was filled not with the echo of cold commands, but with the fragile silence of calm. Adrian clenched his fist, unwilling to admit it. But he knew the truth. The balance of power had shifted. The door slammed shut behind Adrian Cross, its echo hammering through the room. Noah was silent at last, his head resting on Amara Johnson's shoulder, his small fingers gripping her blouse as though for dear life. The most powerful man in the city suddenly felt the weight of his own body pressing down on him. Put him down. His voice was rough, drained of the fury that had burst from him moments ago, but still saturated with authority. He advanced, shoes pounding against the wood, each step thick with anger. Amara remained where she was, her thin back slightly curved to cradle the boy. She did not resist, nor did she panic. When she lifted her face, her gaze was calm, as still as water. In that quiet, Adrian felt that he was the one on trial. "I will," Amara said, her voice slow and measured. "But not because you order me to. Because I believe he is safe now." Noah stirred, clutching her more tightly. That tiny gesture froze Adrian. He was a man who lived on control, who bent markets, companies, and men to his will. But here with his son, power was nothing. "Who do you think you are?" he demanded. "You are just a maid. I have paid millions to experts, the best in the world, and they all failed. Yet you, with nothing but a rag in your hands, dare." His words broke, splintered by disbelief. Amara gently placed Noah on a beanbag near the window. He clutched his blanket, his breath steady. She rose and faced Adrian without lowering her eyes. "I don't think I am anyone," she said quietly. "I saw a child calling for help, and no one answered." Adrian fell silent. He was accustomed to obedience, to fear. But there was no fear in her. Only calm, like truth itself, standing bare before him. He collapsed into an armchair, ignoring the creases in his expensive suit, pressing his forehead into his hand. "I brought in the best," he muttered. "They came with degrees, plans, therapies. Yet my son remains lost. Why is it that you, with nothing but a few gestures, made him rest?" Amara hesitated, Germain's face rising in her memory. Her younger brother, who had once curled in corners, biting his lip until it bled. The adults had never understood. Not until their grandmother sat with him, pressed her hand to her chest, and drew a circle. "Safe." Amara swallowed. "I lived it," she whispered. "My brother was like Noah. Not broken, not sick, just different. When people shouted, he withdrew. But if someone sat with him in patience, he opened. I learned to speak with my hands, with my eyes, with silence. Today, I only did that again." Adrian lifted his head. His eyes, once cold as steel, cracked, revealing exhaustion buried deep. He heard not theory, but memory, lived truth. "What is your name?" he asked, his tone stripped of command. "Amara Johnson. I clean the East Wing. No degree, no training." His lips twisted into a bitter smile. "Just a maid." She did not answer. Her steady gaze carried no anger, only a quiet truth. Titles mean nothing. Actions speak. For a moment, Adrian saw Grace, his late wife, who once sang Noah to sleep. He wondered if Grace herself had sent this woman, whose heart seemed large enough to fill the silence. Amara stood still, unaware of the storm in him. She only knew Noah slept peacefully, and that was enough to withstand every doubt. Afternoon sunlight spilled across the carpet, casting gold over the boy's face. The ticking of the clock marked the moment of change. Adrian exhaled, his voice slow, deliberate. You will stay tonight. I want to see if this calm is coincidence." Amara inclined her head, without resistance or fear. Inside, she knew the first confrontation had passed, and the turning had begun. Power in the Cross Mansion had shifted. A man who ruled an empire, a boy who had never spoken, and a maid thought insignificant. From this moment, an invisible thread bound them together, opening the door to a story no one could have predicted. Night fell over the Cross estate, the long corridors glittering as if coated in a thin layer of ice. In his study, Adrian Cross sat motionless behind a heavy desk, his hand turning a fountain pen over and over. He had signed hundreds of contracts worth billions, yet tonight his thoughts circled only one image: his son resting against the shoulder of Amara Johnson. A knock at the door broke the silence. She entered, her figure simple in a uniform, still carrying the faint sting of bleach. "You called for me?" Amara asked softly. Adrian gestured to the chair opposite him. The air felt thick like a courtroom, his gaze a sentence waiting to fall. She sat carefully, her hands tightly clasped. "I watched all day," Adrian began. "Noah has never let anyone close. Yet today, he let you hold him. Why?" Amara's pulse raced. She had braced herself for reproach, not a question like this. She drew a steady breath. "I have no formula," she said. "My younger brother was like Noah. I learned to listen with my eyes, with my hands, with silence. I only repeated that today." Adrian leaned back, his eyes flickering with something unsteady. He had spent a fortune on specialists, all failures. Yet this woman, a cleaner, had brought calm to his son. "You are not a doctor?" "No degree," he said slowly. "But I want you to stay. No longer as someone who scrubs floors. I need you to care for Noah." Amara looked up, stunned. "You want me to be his nanny?" "No," Adrian cut her off. "I do not need a nanny. I need someone he trusts. And that someone is you." Her heart tightened. She had come here to earn enough money to buy medicine for her grandmother, a temporary job without strings. But this offer pulled her into a world of risk. "I am not sure I am good enough," she admitted. "I can soothe him, but long-term care is something else." Adrian leaned forward, his eyes sharp though his voice had lowered. "I have paid thousands of dollars per hour for the best, and not one of them succeeded. I do not need credentials. I need truth. And the truth is, he chose you." Amara fell silent, her grandmother's words echoing in her mind. "If God opens a door, do not waste time arguing with the handle." "Your terms?" she asked carefully. "Your own room in the estate. Double pay. No more mops or buckets. Only Noah. I will cover every personal expense." Numbers swirled in her mind. With that income, her grandmother would have every treatment she needed. Yet fear pressed in. If she failed, Noah would be abandoned again. "I need time," she breathed. Adrian leaned closer, his gaze piercing. "You have until morning." "I do not offer twice." A chill ran through her, not from threat, but from the realization that he was placing his entire heart and his son's future into her hands. She rose, bowed slightly. "I understand." The door closed behind her, leaving Adrian alone beneath the golden lamp. He leaned back, eyes closed. For the first time in years, he felt his empire powerless to save his family. And ironically, his only hope lay in the hands of the girl he once considered beneath him. In the corridor, Amara's footsteps rang, fast, then slow. She looked at the staircase leading down to the servants' quarters, the world she had known, invisible and quiet. But tonight, that world had become the threshold to something new. Upstairs, Noah turned in his sleep, his lips moving faintly as if to call for someone. No sound formed, but it was enough to spark hope. Amara stopped, her hand pressed against her chest, where her heart pounded hard. She knew tomorrow would decide everything. For the first time in years, she was no longer defined by her lowly title, but by her chance to be the key to a child's life, to a family's salvation. Darkness enveloped the mansion, but within that darkness, a fragile light had been lit. Fragile, yet steadfast. On Amara's first morning back, the Cross estate wore a different face. Gone was the heavy silence of previous days, replaced instead by the fragile feeling of a house waiting to be tested. She carried only a small bag, with a few clothes, an old notebook, and a faded photo of her grandmother. For Amara, possessions mattered less than the determination beating in her chest, to attempt what no one believed she could. Noah sat in the playroom, his distant gaze fixed on red and blue wooden blocks. He did not look at anyone, but when Amara entered, his small hand froze and slowly pushed one block toward her. The simple gesture made her heart tighten. It had begun. "Good morning, Noah," she whispered, lowering herself to the rug. She did not move too close, only near enough for him not to feel alone. The ticking clock filled the quiet. Adrian stood in the doorway, arms crossed, his eyes never leaving them. He was used to Noah's screams, his self-inflicted scratches. Yet today, there was no outburst, only a silence brimming with possibility. Amara slid a green block back to him. Noah hesitated, then nudged it toward her. A wordless game began, the blocks shifting back and forth, fleeting glances meeting, their breathing falling into rhythm. When Amara softly hummed an old tune, Noah tilted his head, his ears listening. Adrian's chest tightened. Part awe, part bitterness. He had paid for polished therapies and dazzling experts, but none had given Noah the simple calm he was witnessing now. That afternoon, Amara brought out a small board and marker. She drew a sun, then a cloud, then passed the pen to Noah. He stared, then slowly drew a crooked shape. A heart. Amara's hand trembled, her vision blurred. She smiled and whispered, "That's wonderful, Noah." Behind them, Adrian gripped the doorframe. He could not remember the last time he had seen his son create something on his own. In that moment, he knew Amara's presence was no accident. Day by day, the room once filled with cries grew alive with new sounds, blocks clattering together, the scratch of a marker, Amara's gentle songs. Noah still did not speak, but his eyes had changed, eyes that searched, that connected. One afternoon, Amara tried teaching him a simple sign, more. She moved slowly, patiently. At first, Noah ignored her. Then his tiny fingers mimicked the gesture, imperfect but clear. Amara swallowed her tears, clapped softly to encourage him. Noah looked at her longer, a faint spark in his eyes. Adrian walked in at that very moment. He saw his son learning, saw Amara's proud smile. His throat constricted. Since Grace's death, the house had drowned in mourning and his own rigid control. But Amara, with hands worn from scrubbing floors, had brought back something money never could: life. That evening, Amara settled into her newly prepared room. Simple, warm, with a window overlooking the garden. She placed her grandmother's photo on the desk and whispered, "I am trying, and I think I can do this." Outside, the garden lights shimmered through the curtains, like candles urging her forward. Meanwhile, Adrian sat alone in his study, reopening Noah's old therapy reports. Dry words, endless failures. He closed the files, admitting to himself for the first time The truth was not written on paper, but reflected in the boy's eyes when they turned toward Amara. The first days were not easy. One morning Noah screamed and slammed his head against the wall. Adrian moved to restrain him, but Amara stopped him. "Let me," she said firmly. She sat on the floor, drew the safe circle over her chest. Noah slowed, then collapsed into her arms. Adrian watched, his heart twisted. He had lived with helplessness, but now he saw her wielding power through gentleness. That night, he found her in the back garden under the moonlight. She sat on a stone bench, quiet. Adrian hesitated, no longer the cold CEO, but a father searching for hope. "You did what no one else has," he admitted. "What is your secret?" Amara looked up, her eyes bright yet calm. "There is no secret, only love and patience." The simple reply left him speechless. In the darkness, he realized the greatest power was not strategy, but an embrace willing to wait. Noah slept peacefully upstairs, the mansion echoing for the first time with steady breaths. And all three of them, each in different corners of the house, knew they had just stepped across a new threshold. Spring flowed into the garden of the Cross estate, red camellias blooming brilliantly beneath the soft morning sun. Amara sat on the grass with Noah, guiding his small hands to mold clay into simple shapes. The boy rarely smiled, yet today his lips curved faintly as he stared at the crooked clay bird in his palm. Light washed over them, turning the scene into a picture of quiet peace. From the veranda, Adrian observed in silence. He was learning to step back and watch his son instead of seizing control. It unsettled him, a man who had spent years dictating every detail. But Amara revealed to him a truth he had never considered: the strength that comes from listening. After lunch, Adrian invited Amara into his study. His tone was gentler, though edged with caution. "I want to ask about your brother," he said. "You mentioned him once." Amara stilled. The memory of Germaine was a scar carved into her. She traced her teacup before answering. "My brother could not speak. People called him a burden. But for me, he was my childhood. I swore I would never let another child feel forgotten as he did." Adrian was quiet, tapping his finger against the desk. For a moment, sorrow flickered in his eyes. He remembered Grace, his wife, patient and steadfast with Noah. Since her death, he had replaced affection with rigid schedules and expensive experts, mistaking that for duty, yet only widening the distance. "You remind me of Grace," Adrian murmured. She too believed Noah did not need fixing, only acceptance. His voice cracked, then closed, as if afraid of exposing too much. Amara studied him, sensing the fractures behind his stern facade. She remained silent, knowing that silence could be the truest reply. Days unfolded with new trials. Amara taught Noah signs for safe, love, and help. At first, he only stared, then hesitantly copied. Adrian secretly mimicked as well, clumsy but determined. One afternoon, he signed more, and Noah responded with shaky precision. The moment tightened Adrian's throat, his eyes damp though he hid it. Peace did not last untouched. One evening, as Amara tidied the living room, Mrs. Green, the housekeeper, approached and whispered, "Be careful, girl. Mr. Cross changes people as easily as suits. Today he sees you differently. Tomorrow he may turn cold as ice." Amara lifted her head, gaze steady. "I do not care how he sees me. I care only for Noah." Mrs. Green sighed and left, but her words left a shadow in Amara's chest. Could this trust endure, or was it only another test? That night, Amara opened the small box beneath her pillow. Inside was her grandmother's photo and a letter from her mother, who had abandoned her as a child. The few words contained only an apology for leaving. Each time she read it, Amara remembered why Noah mattered so deeply to her. She would not let him feel the abandonment she once knew. In his study, Adrian unlocked a drawer sealed for years. He pulled out an album filled with photos of Grace holding Noah. On the last page was an image taken weeks before she died, smiling despite illness. Beneath it, her shaky handwriting read, "If one day you forget how to listen to our son, find someone who can." Adrian traced the words, his chest tightening. Was Amara the one Grace had meant? The next morning, Amara led Noah into the garden. Suddenly he made a sound, short but clear. Amara froze. Adrian rushed forward, eyes burning. He just tried to speak, didn't he? Amara nodded, tears blurring her vision. It was a call. Not a word yet, but a sign. Noah lifted his small hand, placing Amara's into his father's. 3 hands joined, forming a fragile yet unyielding circle. Adrian tightened his grip, and in that instant felt the wall around his family begin to crack. That night, Amara wrote in her journal by the window, "Noah has opened the first door. And I saw that behind Adrian's steel exterior is a heart longing to be seen." Outside, stars glimmered in the spring sky, the breeze drifting gently across the garden. The mansion no longer stood as a fortress of solitude, but as the beginning of something greater. The slow unfolding of healing. The quiet morning in the Cross estate shattered under the weight of heavy knocks at the door. Amara was preparing breakfast for Noah when the silver spoon slipped from her hand. The pounding grew faster, harsher, as if ready to break down the entrance. Adrian appeared in the hallway, his face darkening. He opened the door. 3 strangers stood outside in tailored suits. A tall, thin man held out his badge. "We are from Child Protective Services. A report has been filed of suspected child abuse at this address. We need to conduct an immediate inspection." The air in the foyer thickened. Amara clutched Noah tightly, the boy trembling, his eyes wide with panic. Memories surged back, memories of Germain being pulled from his family's arms under the cold stare of social workers. Adrian's voice was steady, but his jaw was tight. "Who filed the report?" "I'm sorry, the law forbids us from disclosing that," the man replied. "If you resist, we will request a court order." Adrian glanced at Amara. He knew if they took Noah away, every fragile step of progress would collapse. He stepped aside and muttered, "Come in. But I will be present." The inspection began. They searched the living room, the kitchen, then Noah's room. The boy screamed when the strangers approached, burying himself deeper into Amara's arms. A female officer reached toward him, but Amara blocked her. "Please, let me handle this. He cannot tolerate strange touch." The man frowned. "And who are you to this child?" "Amara Johnson, his full-time caregiver." They wrote notes, exchanged glances. Amara kept her voice even, her hand rubbing Noah's back to soothe him. When the inspection ended, they found no signs of abuse. The man closed his folder, his tone softening. "We will file our report. Personally, it is rare to see a child cared for this attentively." Adrian's voice was sharp. "Who is using my son as a weapon?" No answer came. When the door shut, the house fell into heavy silence. Amara wrapped Noah in a blanket, then turned to Adrian. "You know who is behind this. Rivals in the merger," he exhaled. "They want to bring me down, and Noah is my weakness." His eyes darkened like steel. That night, Adrian gathered his lawyers and security team. Maps, charts, counter strategies spread across the table. Amara sat in a corner, holding Noah, who had fallen asleep in her lap, her heart restless. She knew this was no longer just a corporate battle. It was a fight to protect a fragile child. When the meeting ended, Adrian approached. "You do not need to be involved. It is dangerous." Amara lifted her head, her eyes unwavering. "Noah took my hand. I will not let go." In that moment, Adrian looked at her as an ally. The woman, once dismissed, now stood as a warrior. Night fell. Amara sat on the sofa with Noah asleep in her arms. The cold glow of security lights spilled through the glass. The boy stirred, but his hand still clutched her wrist. That grip felt like a vow unspoken. In his study, Adrian opened Grace's old album. On the last page, her shaky handwriting remained. "If one day you forget how to listen to our son, find someone who can." He touched the words and whispered, "I have found her, Grace. But the price is a storm." By morning, the press was ablaze with rumors. Headlines screamed, "Cross Corporation investigated for child abuse." Cut and twisted photos, cruel accusations flooded the papers. Amara's face burned as she held a copy. They are using Noah as a tool. Adrian entered, dark circles under his eyes. He slammed his phone onto the desk. "I will strike back. They want war. I will give them war." Amara spoke slowly, firmly. "You can fight the whole world, but Noah only needs peace. Do not let your war become the shadow that crushes him." Her words silenced him. He looked at his son, stacking colored blocks on the floor. In that flash, he realized protecting his child did not mean control. It meant creating space for him to grow in love. Outside, the storm of rumors raged. But inside the estate, something unexpected was taking root. Amara's resolve, Noah's fragility, and Adrian's awakening were weaving a new bond. The past had come knocking, bringing danger, but it also forced them to face the truth. Family does not live in financial reports. It lives in hearts brave enough to hold on to one another. The kitchen was filled with the sweet scent of baked pastries. Morning sunlight streamed through the glass windows, casting its glow across the long dining table draped in pristine white linen. Amara was teaching Noah how to cut strawberries into small star shapes. The boy concentrated hard, lips pressed together, his eyes shining for the first time with the light of a child truly at play. Adrian leaned against the doorway, a cup of coffee in hand, forgotten. In his mind, a memory surfaced. Grace once guiding Noah in the same way. The emptiness returned, but this time it was no longer cold, for that space had begun to be filled by Amara. Noah cut a lopsided star and turned toward Amara. He did not speak, but raised the piece of strawberry in his small hand. Amara bent down and smiled brightly. "Wonderful, Noah." The boy smiled back, a rare smile that stopped Adrian in his tracks. His heartbeat thundered as though he too had been saved. That afternoon, Amara led Noah into the garden. He toddled around the rose bushes, pausing to sniff the blossoms. Adrian followed at a distance. He saw his son no longer curled in on himself, saw Amara patient beside him, her every gesture filled with warmth. A dangerous thought flickered through his mind. If she left, this home would collapse. That evening, after Noah had gone to bed, Amara was tidying the toys in the living room when Adrian approached and stopped just behind her. "He smiled today," he said quietly. Amara turned, her eyes glowing with gentle light. "He can smile even more if he always feels safe." Adrian gazed at her, his dark eyes fathomless. He was accustomed to fear and reverence, but Amara did not fear him. She looked at him as a man, not a symbol. For the first time in years, he felt his heart stir. "You have changed this place," Adrian admitted. "I owe you more than a job." Amara pressed her lips together, saying nothing. She feared mistaking gratitude for something else, but Adrian's gaze did not allow her to hide. A sudden gust rattled the glass, sending the curtains fluttering. Amara startled, leaning slightly into him. Adrian caught her, his hand brushing her arm. In that brief moment, they both heard something beyond reason, the thundering beat of two hearts in unison. Amara stepped back quickly, her cheeks flushed. "I'm sorry." Adrian said nothing. He only watched her, his eyes speaking more than words. The next day, they took Noah to a sensory play center for special children. At first, the boy shrank back, but with Amara's gentle encouragement, he tried the slide, then giggled softly as he tumbled into the ball pit. Adrian stood nearby, stunned. He had never heard his son laugh like that. His vision blurred, and when he looked at Amara, he realized she was not only saving Noah, but healing his own hardened heart. On the way home, the car glided beneath the rows of trees. Noah slept in the back seat. In the quiet, Adrian murmured, "Grace once wished Noah would find someone who understood him. I think you may be that person." Amara tightened her hands, forcing her voice steady. "I only do what I believe is right." "No," Adrian replied, his gaze steady on her. "You do more. You remind me how to be a father." Amara's chest ached. She turned toward the window, hiding her tearful eyes. That night, Amara wrote in her journal. Noah smiled. "Adrian is changing. I am afraid that I am stepping into a place with no way back. But my heart no longer listens to reason." In his study, Adrian opened the liquor cabinet, poured a glass, but did not drink. He sat in silence, thinking of Amara's eyes, of her arms wrapped protectively around Noah. A man who had lived on power and coldness now realized his heart had begun to speak again. Upstairs, Noah shifted in sleep and murmured an unclear sound. It was not a word. Yet to both Adrian and Amara, it was a promise that the future could still bloom if they were brave enough to follow the voice of the heart. The pounding at the door echoed like a hammer striking steel. Amara froze in the kitchen as she prepared breakfast for Noah. It was not the polite knock of staff or familiar guests, but urgent, relentless, and threatening. Adrian appeared within seconds, his face tense as a drawn bow. He opened the door, and 3 people stepped inside. A tall man in a gray suit carrying a folder, a woman with short hair in a dark blazer, and another figure with headphones whose cold eyes swept the room. The emblem on their documents gleamed. Child Protective Services. "Mr. Caldwell?" the man said firmly. "We received a report of potential neglect of your son. We are here to conduct an assessment." The air froze. Amara clutched Noah tightly, her heart hammering. The boy sensed the pressure, buried his face in her shoulder, trembling. Adrian closed the door behind them, his gaze sharp as a blade. "Who filed this report?" "I'm sorry. That information is confidential," the man replied flatly. "We need to evaluate the child's environment." Amara held Noah closer. The boy twisted in panic, his small hand clutching her shirt. Adrian saw it, fury rising, but he forced his voice steady. "You will not touch my son without me and his caregiver present." The inspection began. They combed through the living room, the kitchen, even Noah's therapy room. Amara walked beside them, whispering in sign language to Noah. "Safe," Here. A female officer leaned down, suggesting a private talk with the child. Noah screamed, clinging to Amara like his life depended on it. Amara stood her ground. No, he does not communicate with strangers. I will translate. Her tone was unwavering, her eyes steel. Adrian nodded, adding coldly, "She's right. You will not force him." The inspection lasted nearly an hour. They searched for flaws, but found only a spotless home, a tidy child's room, and a boy pressed into the arms of a woman who clearly loved him beyond herself. As they left, the man in the gray suit hesitated, his voice lowering. Truthfully, it's rare to see a child cared for so thoroughly. Perhaps this report had other motives. Adrian's fists clenched, but he remained silent. When the door closed, the estate sank into heavy quiet, broken only by Amara's ragged breath and Noah's small sobs. "Someone is targeting us," Adrian said, his voice like iron. "And I think I know who." That afternoon, he convened an emergency meeting in his study. Sandra, his trusted attorney, and Lionel Hatch, a silver-haired security advisor with eyes sharpened by years in protection, joined him. "This was no random check," Adrian began. "Someone manipulated the system to strike at my family. The motive ties directly to the merger." Sandra scanned the files. "Lark Technologies is under pressure. If your guardianship is questioned, Caldwell Dynamics' reputation collapses." Lionel tapped the table. "I traced a leak. A former assistant still has access to your schedule. She now works for Lark." Adrian's jaw tightened as the name formed. Sylvia Warner, the woman who once stood at his side, now turned traitor. Amara sat silently, her hands clasped tightly. She knew this was more than business. This was an attack on Noah, an innocent child. Adrian caught her eyes. "You don't need to be involved. This is my fight." Amara shook her head. "No. The moment I held Noah, I chose to stay. If anyone wants to hurt him, they'll have to go through me first." Her words stunned the room. Sandra glanced up, surprised at the strength in the woman once dismissed as only a maid. Adrian looked at Amara, and in that moment, he knew there was no retreat. Night fell, the mansion glowing under cold lights. Noah slept peacefully, clutching his teddy bear. Amara sat by the window, her journal open. She wrote, "The storm outside is rising, but I will not fear, because Noah is my reason to stand." In his study, Adrian drafted a final email. Initiate the countersuit. Expose everything. His eyes burned with fire. The power he wielded was no longer to protect his empire, but to protect the fragile family forming within these walls. And he knew the battle had only begun. The courtroom buzzed with noise, the gallery packed with reporters, camera flashes bursting like lightning. The air was heavy with ambition and the hunger for scandal. At the defense table, Adrian Caldwell sat tall, his gaze cold and sharp, his black suit a shield of armor. Beside him, Amara clasped her hands tightly in her lap, willing herself to stay calm. Across the aisle sat Sylvia Warner, once his trusted assistant, now his betrayer. At her side lounged Greg Sinclair, CEO of Lark Technologies, his arrogant smile daring the room. They were certain today would bring Adrian's downfall, not only in law, but in reputation. Judge Monroe, her silver hair tied neatly back, struck the gavel. The case of Caldwell Dynamics versus Lark Technologies is now in session. The lawyers attacked with precision. Lark accused Caldwell of ruthless acquisitions, of hiding the state of his son's care. Words rained down like knives, aimed at both Adrian and Amara. In the gallery, whispers spread quickly. Who is that maid? Why is she sitting at the defense table? Every stare stabbed into Amara like an arrow. She felt the weight of judgment, but she lifted her head and thought of Noah waiting at home. Lionel Hatch, Adrian's security advisor, took the stand. Calm and methodical, he presented digital evidence. Abused access logs, leaked data, proof that the false report had been orchestrated by Sylvia. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Sylvia's face hardened, though she smirked in defiance. Then the opposing counsel changed tactics. And what of Amara Williams? She has no degree, no qualifications, no authority. Who is she to interfere in the life of a child? All eyes turned to Amara. Her heart tightened, but before fear could root her, Judge Monroe's voice rang out. "Ms. Williams, will you testify?" Amara rose. Her footsteps struck the wooden floor with resolve, each one defying disdain. She took her seat at the witness stand, placed her hand on the Bible, swore her oath, and lifted her chin. "I am not a doctor, not a specialist. I am someone who lost a younger brother with autism, a boy no one would listen to. When I saw Noah hurting himself, I could not walk away. I stayed, because I know what it feels like to be forgotten." The courtroom stilled. Her eyes burned bright, her voice carrying pain and conviction. "Mr. Caldwell did not compel me. I chose to remain. I chose to protect that boy. Because a child does not need cold reports, he needs someone brave enough to sit beside him in silence." Her words cut through suspicion like a blade. Some in the gallery lowered their eyes. Even Judge Monroe gave a slight nod, respect shining in her gaze. The opposing attorney tried to recover. "But you are only a maid." "By what right?" Amara cut him off, her voice firm. "By the right of a human being who refuses to abandon a child." The declaration erupted through the room. Reporters scribbled furiously, Sylvia bit her lip, and Greg Sinclair clenched his jaw. When Amara returned to her seat, Adrian placed his hand against the table, his eyes locked on her, filled with pride. He had never witnessed such courage. The trial stretched on into the evening. At last, Judge Monroe delivered her ruling. The court dismisses Lark Technologies' claims for lack of evidence. Furthermore, there is indication of manipulating social services for personal gain. That matter will be investigated. Her gavel struck like thunder. Sylvia paled. Greg rose abruptly, storming out in rage. Reporters swarmed Adrian and Amara. One shouted, "Ms. Williams, how do you feel being called just a maid?" Amara paused, facing the cameras. "If being a maid means being by a child's side when he needs it most, then I am proud of that title." Her words echoed far beyond the courtroom. By the next morning, headlines no longer labeled her a maid, but a guardian. That night, inside the mansion, Noah sat in Amara's lap, his small hand against her cheek. He did not speak, but his shining eyes said enough. Adrian stood nearby, silent witness. He understood now that this battle had revealed the truth. Family is not forged by blood or titles, but by choice. And together, the ones once underestimated had prevailed. The morning after the trial, sunlight poured across the wide glass windows of the Caldwell estate. For the first time in months, the heavy chill was gone, replaced by warmth seeping into every corner. In the kitchen, Amara prepared breakfast, while Noah sat in his high chair, fingers playing with a small green spoon. His face glowed with peace, no longer shadowed by fear. Adrian entered, no longer in his armor of a suit. He wore a simple white shirt with sleeves rolled up. His face softened, the lines of sorrow eased. When Noah saw him, the boy reached out and whispered one fragile word, Dada. Adrian froze, his heart bursting. He bent down and lifted his son into his arms. No other proof was needed. That single word swept away every doubt that had haunted him. Amara stood nearby, eyes brimming. She thought of Jermaine, her lost brother, and saw in Noah's smile the reflection of the boy she once loved. For the first time, memory was not a wound, but a flame of comfort. Days later, the court issued its final ruling. Caldwell Dynamics was vindicated, while Lark Technologies faced investigation for abusing social services. Sylvia Warner vanished from the media. Greg Sinclair crumbled under the fury of investors. No longer did the public cast suspicion on Amara. Instead, the press called her the Keeper of Light, the one who had brought change to an entire family. One afternoon, as camellias blazed in the garden, Adrian found Amara sitting alone on a stone bench, her old journal in hand. He sat beside her in silence. The wind rustled, birds sang. At last, his rough voice broke the quiet. I once thought I could control everything with money and power. I was wrong. What I needed, what Noah needed, was presence. And you taught me that. Amara looked up, her gaze clear though uncertain. I only did what I had to do. Adrian shook his head. No, you did more. You gave us back a family, and you gave me a chance to begin again. He paused, then added, I don't want you to remain just an employee. I want you to be part of this place. Not because Noah needs you, because I do. Amara's heart trembled. She looked at her rough hands, remembered years of labor. She had never imagined belonging in Adrian's world of wealth, power, and flashing cameras. Yet as she watched Noah running through the garden, holding out a flower toward her, she understood. This home was not a fortress of stone, but a place where hearts could heal. Are you sure? She whispered. Adrian nodded firmly. For the first time in my life, I am. Her laugh broke into tears. She took his hand, not promising, only a gentle squeeze, but enough for both to know they had found a shared path. The months that followed transformed life in the Caldwell estate. Noah blossomed each day. He did not speak much, but learned new signs. Sometimes he laughed aloud at Adrian's clumsy puppet shows, or leaned against Amara as she sang softly. Each small moment was a victory. Amara, too, stepped into the light. Judge Monroe herself invited her to join the state's Child Welfare Advisory Board. Amara hesitated, but Adrian encouraged her. You didn't just change us. You can change so much more. And so the woman once dismissed as only a maid became a voice for thousands of forgotten children. One late spring evening, the three of them sat by the fireplace. Noah was curled in a blanket, eyes heavy with sleep. Adrian read a story, his voice warm in a way it had never been. Amara sat beside them, listening to the crackle of burning wood, feeling the glow spread through her. In that moment, she knew the tragedy had ended, and a new journey had begun. Love had not arrived like a storm. It had grown quietly, steadily, in every gesture, every look. And family was not always built from blood. Sometimes it was born from choice, from the courage to stay when everyone else walked away. That night, in her room, Amara opened her journal and wrote the final lines. I once believed I was only a shadow, but light chooses even the strongest shadows. And in that light, we found each other. Outside the window, camellia petals drifted to the ground, closing one chapter and whispering the beginning of another. Life is full of the unexpected. Sometimes true strength does not come from money, fame, or power, but from quiet observation and simple love. People may look down on a servant, a maid, or someone thought to have no voice. Yet it is often they, through patience and a heart that knows how to listen, who achieve what no expert ever could. There are wounds no medicine can heal, but they can be soothed by sincere presence. There are silences that seem hopeless, yet they can become the beginning of new hope. And it is in those fragile moments that we realize real love does not need to be loud. It only needs to be steady and true. If you too believe that small acts can create great change, press the like button on this video. If you have ever witnessed or lived a moment when quiet care changed everything, share it in the comments, because your story may give strength to someone else. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next inspiring story. And tell us where in the world you are watching from. Perhaps someone close to you is listening to this same story right now. Love does not choose a place, it does not distinguish color, and it never fades. It only needs one heart brave enough to give it away.